This is the party of FDR. We did originally make in America. We industrialized the entire country. It's the party that has guaranteed Americans Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid.
I'm sorry, but the Democratic Party isn't giving off FDR vibes at all.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur and Experiment with you guys. Normally we do a bonus episode for the members at 8 o'clock Eastern, but these days we're doing a lot more interviews, and we got a great one for you guys tonight. Representative Khanna joins us. He's got a proposal in Congress, which is really interesting. It works with some Republicans to put them to the test on whether they really mean what they say. So we're gonna get to that in a minute, but first, Representative Khanna, welcome back.
Thank you, always great to be on.
All right, before we get to the farmer proposal, which I think is really smart and interesting, you were on Fox News recently and created a little bit of a stir. We like stirs. So I wanna show the clip a little bit and then talk about it with you.
Is Rahm Emanuel right here? Has your party become too woke, too non-masculine, and not talking with people about the things that matter?
No, he's dead wrong. Look, this is the party of FDR. We did originally make in America. We industrialized the entire country. It's the party that has guaranteed Americans Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. I'm calling for a new economic patriotism so we become a manufacturing superpower, so we have high-paying jobs and build wealth in every community and have a Marshall Plan for America. The history of the Democratic Party, it's a great party.
So, Ro, that was great because you took something that isn't going right in the Democratic Party and said, remember what the Democratic Party is actually about and what it's been about historically. Then Lawrence Jones pushed back and said, no, you guys are all about the woke stuff, etc. So how do you get past people, right-wingers, mainstream media, constantly bringing up the issues where Democrats went wrong recently, and never actually addressing the core of the party that the American people used to love?
Well, they're calling out what did go wrong. NAFTA, China's ascension into the World Trade Organization, which ironically Rahm Emanuel was part of. The part of the Democratic Party that was working was FDR, Johnson, Kennedy's call for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, for building things in America, for having unions and collective bargaining, for having high wages, for making sure that we were leading in industries across the nation. And I think we need those values, but applied to modern times. For our party to have a robust economic vision of development in every community, making sure we actually deliver this time on a living wage, on paid family leave, on childcare, and that we are committed to those priorities. And we call out some of the absurdities. I just did this morning in San Francisco. It had this policy of grading on equity where everyone over 80% got an A and anyone over 40% got a C. I said it was absurd, and so did the San Francisco mayor and the superintendent backdraft. So when you see those kind of absurd things, I think we need to call them out.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I gotta follow up on that. Thank you for putting that statement out in regard to this whole BS snake oil, grading for equity program where, the guy behind it is this consultant who charges $10,000 a day to coach teachers on how to pass failing students that shouldn't be passed. Because I do think that those types of acts are associated with the Democratic Party and people are sick of it. And so, I hear what you're saying about the history of the Democratic Party. You're right about that. But I don't think the current modern Democratic Party is giving off FDR vibes. You know what I'm saying? Especially when you look at the past administration. Sure, Biden did pass some important bills, but there was a lot of nickel and diming happening. And I remember the decoupling of the, physical infrastructure from the social infrastructure, meaning the social safety net in his Build Back Better plan. And what we expected to happen did happen. The public, or I should say the physical infrastructure bill passed easily because that's gonna help corporations. But this effort to make our social safety net more robust, in my opinion, didn't go nearly far enough. And so when you're talking about negotiating 10 drug prices for Medicare, most of which are about to have their patents run out, I'm sorry, but the Democratic Party isn't giving off FDR vibes at all. there might be a few Democrats who still believe in that mission and that identity, but the whole of the Democratic Party doesn't give off that vibe at all.
Well, I co-chaired Bernie Sanders' campaign, and that wing, I believe, explicitly takes inspiration from the Economic Bill of Rights of FDR, and then we should take inspiration from his vision for production of actually investing in communities and factories and building a workforce. So I agree with you. There were missed opportunities with Biden, and we discussed this, Cenk and I, and I know with you on this show. I mean, we should have delivered an increase in the minimum wage. I called for firing the parliamentarian then. They said that was crazy. Now the Republicans are talking about firing the parliamentarian. That was the biggest miss when we had the majority in the House, the Senate, the presidency, and we could not increase wages in this country. We could not get a paid family leave bill passed. We did nothing for childcare. But there is a group of folks in the party committed to that. And we're also committed to having the highest priority, the economic independence and security of Americans across this country, both in terms of creation of high jobs and securing education, childcare, healthcare. And that, I think people will be able to sense that, the urgency, the commitment, the record of fighting for that. And we'll see now if that wing of the party is ascended finally or not.
Yeah. So, you're pushing the populist plank within the House. Yesterday, Representative Gil Cisneros signed it, and he's more of a moderate Democrat. So the core economic populist proposals in the Democratic Party are deeply popular. They're popular with the American people. They're popular within the Democratic Party. So that's encouraging. But I want to go back to Rahm Emanuel for one more minute here, because, look, I'm worried about the culture wars and how it went too far. I think the right wing started a lot of them, and then some in the left fell into that trap, in my opinion. But to me, the much bigger issue are the economic issues. And that's where the Democratic Party fell even more flat. Because it's people like Rahm Emanuel who said, go corporate and please the donors. And while Rahm Emanuel was chief of staff and in a lot of ways in charge of the Democratic Party, chief of staff for Barack Obama, we lost 1,000 seats nationwide, the Democratic Party did. So, Ro, isn't the main problem of the old Democratic Party that we're trying to reform really an economic problem, that they're not serving the voters, they're serving the donors?
Well, it was a problem of economics and globalization. I mean, Rahm Emanuel was proud. He was the architect of NAFTA. I mean, that hollowed out Michigan, it hollowed out Ohio, it hollowed out Pennsylvania. It was the betrayal, the beginning of the betrayal of working class voters that Trump later won. They were the architects of policies to allow China into the World Trade Organization. That created the China shock, according to David Otter, that literally hollowed out towns like Johnstown and Lorain and Warren, Ohio. So this was the mistake. Now, whether it was a mistake because of corporate greed and corporate funding, I'm sure that had something to do with it, whether it was mistaken ideology. The point is, we've got to say it was a mistake. And then the reality is we have been unwilling to fight for things like Medicare for all, actually taking on prescription drug prices, because we were too beholden to the influence of big money in American politics. We've got to be a party that gets back to centering the working class, centering having industry and economic opportunity in these places that were decimated by globalization, and standing up to big corporate interests if they are standing in the way of delivering healthcare, education, lower prescription drugs for the American people. It doesn't mean that we have to be anti-business. There could be economic patriots if they want to invest in the United States, and if they don't want to engage in lobbying that are hurting things. I mean, I'm not saying that every business person is sort of bad. They're business people who care about the community. But what is bad is people spending millions of dollars to block common sense reforms or those who outsource their jobs.
Yeah. So you're saying that just taking 20 million and throwing it into like a study group on how to attract men isn't going to win Democrats elections?
That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. I mean, it reminds me of David Brooks and when I think it was Josh Hawley who went and gave a speech in Missouri on manliness and how the Republicans need to be more manly. And I was having coffee. I don't think Brooks will mind me saying this. He said, you know what? Donald Trump would never have to give a speech on manliness. He just exudes it or something. And the Democrats don't need a study. We just need to understand that a lot of people lost jobs supporting their families. They lost self-respect. We gave all the glory to tech folks in my district, and some of them are doing great things, and finance folks, but not the people who built the steel and built the industry. They literally were flyover country. We never recognized their contributions. We didn't recognize the challenges that men were facing in terms of their physical safety, in terms of getting a good job, and the pressures of supporting a family, in terms of the concerns with law enforcement, and men are incarcerated at a much larger rate. And we kind of made it seem like being a man was easy when men were struggling. And then on top of that, we had this sense that if they said the wrong thing, they would be they'd be canceled. And there was this curtailment on speech. So I don't need a study to say any of that. I just talk to enough people. I mean, maybe just talking to people and understanding people is what's needed.
Yeah, there's nothing less masculine than having to study masculinity to find out what's masculine. Okay, anyways. And look, you're part of Rebellion PAC. Randy Bryce declared in Wisconsin won. It's literally an iron worker, right? His nickname is Iron Stash.
Yeah.
Richard Ojeda, a veteran in North Carolina 9. So the populists are back in the Democratic Party. So now, speaking of which, we go to one of the things in the plank, which is lowering drug prices. So, Ro, you think that the Trump administration is kind of giving you an opening on pharma? And so tell us about that. Well, why do you think there's an opening, and what are you planning to do with other Republicans on the issue of pharma?
Look, Bernie Sanders and I have been pushing this for 5 years. We had a bill that said if pharma charges Americans more than the average price that they're charging other industrialized countries, pharma would lose their patents, and that this would force pharma not to charge Americans 3 to 4 times more than they're charging people in Germany and Japan and France. Donald Trump comes up with an executive order, not as detailed as Bernie Sanders, but basically says Americans shouldn't get charged more than they're paying, than people in Europe and other industrialized nations are paying. And if they do, he's going to empower the cabinet secretaries to go after them for price gouging and for antitrust. Now, this is not perfect, but it would get a lot more done in lowering prescription drug prices than anything proposed so far. And the challenge is, last time Trump proposed something like this in his first term, it was challenged in the courts by Big Pharma and blocked. So I went to the floor and I said, look, I'm not going to change a word of it because it's 70, 80% in the right direction. I'm going to introduce it as a law to codify Trump's executive order. It turned out, coincidentally, I was one of the first people to codify any Trump executive order. Most of them I disagree with. And so this became quite a viral hit in MAGA world. They kept playing my speech, and we've gotten 2 Republicans, Representative Biggs and Representative Luna, on it. And to me, it's a pretty simple thing about if you're going to co-sponsor this or not. Are you in the pockets of Big Pharma and their arguments, or are you going to stand with the American people? There shouldn't be a single Republican who's not on this bill. It's literally Donald Trump's language. And for any Democrat who is sympathetic to going after Big Pharma, let's get on this bill and either get something done or call the Republicans bluff.
Yeah, look, I love that. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up about how people are reacting, because you're basically calling, in my opinion, Trump's bluff. I don't think Trump means it. I think that Trump put out that executive order knowing that it's going to get blocked by the courts like it was last time, so that that way he gets populist credibility without having to actually hurt his beloved corporate donors. So, okay, but let's say I'm wrong, then great, shouldn't every Republican sign on? And since it is something that actually would lower drug prices, that's a progressive and democratic priority that we've always wanted. So if Trump is saying, yeah, I'll do Bernie's policy, I'll do Ro Khanna's policy, I think at this point, a lot of people, the internet knows, I'll take yes for an answer, right? So then that leads to the second part of the question. Shouldn't every Democrat sign on? So what has been the reaction inside Congress? Do Republicans or Democrats ever even give you a reason for not signing on? Because this should be nearly unanimous.
So we've had some initial interest on Republican and Democratic side, but it should be unanimous. We'll see what happens next week after reconciliation. I think the easiest thing in Congress is to just ignore something, and that's what a lot of Republicans will do. Even if Trump is serious about this, he doesn't have to run for re-election, is notwithstanding his bantering about a third term. And so maybe he's willing to take it on, but that doesn't mean that the Republicans in Congress who rely on the big pharma money can do that. And so many of them, I think, are just going to be silent, but we need to pressure them to say, look, this is a moment of truth. On the Democratic side, you have also some Democrats who've bought into the pharma arguments. Now they couch it as, oh, this is going to hurt pharma innovation. Give me a break. Pharma spends more money on stock buybacks and on dividends than they spend on R&D. And there's plenty of room, if they're paying an international price, for them still to have the money on R&D. And by the way, if you want to subsidize the R&D, we can provide a tax credit just for the R&D. So there are other ways to get at the R&D. So you'll get some Democrats there, and then some Democrats. They're always the Democrats who let the perfect be the enemy of the good. They'll say, well, this isn't as good as Bernie's bill. Well, no, it's not as good as Bernie's bill, but Bernie's not president. So we've got to deal with at least getting a good bill that may not be perfect.
I'm curious if there's been, let's say, in a perfect world where, the president isn't a liar who's looking for populist credit without actually doing anything, and he supports this effort, pushes for it, and tries to get this legislation passed. Do you get the sense that there might be some Democrats who are upset at the notion of working with the right to pass a bill like this?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. There's some who say, don't give him any wins, don't give him any political points. But look, that there are times where there needs to be vociferous opposition. If he's trying to defy court orders, when he's trying to ban international students from Harvard. Schumer had a total capitulation on the budget without getting any guarantees that Trump would actually spend the money Congress appropriated. That's a time to play hardball. But when he's proposing something that literally is going to improve Americans' lives, of those times we should work to do that, because that's going to earn us the credibility with people who voted for him, who may be open to voting for us in the next election if we truly get back to populist roots and say that we're in this for improving the lives of ordinary Americans.
Yeah, and look, I don't have a question here. I just want to make a statement, because the reason why someone like Donald Trump signals this faux populism to his base is because the economic policies that he purports to support are favored by Republican voters, right? So I say that because this is such a political layup if Democrats weren't corrupted, right? Because it wouldn't be that difficult to get voters to switch over by actually carrying out the economic policies that Trump claims he's in favor of, but isn't actually in favor of. If Democrats actually, passed those bills and fought for them, not just propose them and pretend to fight for them, but actually fought for them, I think that they could win back some of the voters who switch sides. But right now, I'm not really seeing a lot of Democrats speak up. They're trying to continue engaging in the culture wars, throw more money at, the problems that they have in attracting men or young people. But in reality, I think it's the cultural stuff on top of the fact that, like, voters look at the Democratic Party and ask themselves, okay, but what are they even doing for me? They're not doing anything to improve my situation. And on top of that, they're just constantly scolding me over my identity. That's not a winning political strategy at all. And so I commend you for being willing to do what you're doing, because I'm sure you're getting some backlash from Democratic voters in some cases, and maybe even some Democratic members of Congress.
I'm getting some, but most people see this as wanting to do something good for the American people. Look, George Will had a column today saying basically, I was wrong on all the issues, but I was reasonable. He cared about people and at least was honest, and that was preferable to sort of J.D. Vance's unconstitutionalism. So I think when you come at it from a sincere place, And if you have a value system that says, I love this country, I want to make a difference for people, and I'm not going to just look at everything from a strictly partisan lens. What ends up happening is you end up building the respect, even if they disagree with you, of people on the other side who can say, okay, you know what? We may not agree with a lot of this stuff, but the person is in a place where he's trying to do things good for the country. And politics is addition. I mean, we can continue to try to speak to our base of a minority base, or we could try to build FDR, Lyndon Johnson like majorities. I'm in the business of trying to get transformative change. Well, that's not just about giving speeches, and it's not just about rallies, though I love them. It's about building a coalition that can win in every part of this country.
Agreed.
Yeah, I have one more specific question, but to your point, I mean, there's no reason to throw in unconstitutional actions on top of populism. I don't know why Trump does that. I mean, I guess he's like authoritarian by nature, but I don't want people to get confused. Populism has nothing to do with violating the Constitution. So basically, Ro, what you seem to be doing is, why don't we follow the Constitution and respect it and still do populism, which I think is going to be much, much more popular with the American people. And then a rule on, Trump's executive orders is an easy one, which is if he wants us to go to his positions, the answer is no. But if he comes to our positions, yeah, why not? He came to our positions.
That's a good one. Yeah, no, I think it's a simple way of looking at it, and it's clarifying, right? If he says, look, let's raise the minimum wage, we should say yes. If he says, let's do paid family leave, we should say yes. And the benefit is it's a win-win for Democrats. Either we call his bluff or we participate in doing something that's good for the country, so he can't get up in his next State of the Union and say, if I propose curing cancer, the Democrats are not going to applaud. I mean, we have to show that we are fundamentally in this for the working class, middle class, for ordinary Americans to improve their lives. And that's a credibility that we have to rebuild. We've lost that, and we have to rebuild it. Now, I said we have a great party because we have a great history. It's not just, the years of mistakes, but we've got to show that that those roots are back, that's the party we are.
Yeah, so Ro, the last question is specific. How do we get a vote on this bill? Because I would love to see which Republicans and which Democrats vote no. Because I mean, I'd love to see which Republicans are going to vote no against Trump's executive order and which Democrats are going to say, no, I love big pharma and I think we should have higher drug prices.
Well, there are only two ways you can get a vote on this practically. One is if Trump goes all in on it, which so far he hasn't, but he could. That's a test of saying, look, I mean, we know he can get the Republicans to vote for something, and he could say, I want to vote on this. But short of that, what we need to do is get 100 co-sponsors, and where there's momentum, where there are 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans saying, look, we believe in this. And then either you get a vote or the absence of co-sponsoring the bill becomes the litmus test itself. That's how we know who's for Medicare for all and who isn't. But we should be pushing this, because if we can't do this now, we're dreaming if we think suddenly a Democrat president's going to come and we're going to get this done. I mean, we've got to be building for these progressive policies at all times to have any shot of getting them implemented.
And isn't it amazing that when Donald Trump wants to be popular, he goes to progressive policies?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he knows that's how he won the presidency, right? He explicitly rejects Mitt Romney, he explicitly rejects Paul Ryan. He says, I'm not going to touch Medicaid, not going to touch Social Security. I'm for lowering prescription drug costs. Now, of course, the budget is a total betrayal of all those promises. It does cut Medicaid. It does give tax breaks to the rich. It doesn't tax people who are rich. It does nothing for the working class. But that's not how he campaigns. And I think he realizes when he has these budgets that are terrible trickle-down economics that he's got to throw in some populism. So he puts out these prescription drug type proposals. What we ought to do is to take those that are actually good and run with them while calling out the parts that are handouts to the ultra wealthy.
Yeah, this sounds like an Operation Hope mission. We, at a minimum, we've got to call up and email and text, et cetera, all of the Democratic congressmen and get them on board with this. Because there's just no reason on God's given earth that a Democrat should be opposed to this bill. So then maybe we'll work on the Republicans, but at least you're trying to do something, Congressman Khanna, and you often appear to be the only one. So we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you doing sensible things that the great majority of Americans agree with. So every time I've talked about you in other shows, even like you said with George Will Geraldo and other right wingers, left wingers, middle wingers, saying the only sensible man in Congress. So
well, there's a group of next generation folks. Politics a team sport, but Jen, you've been great in going out and engaging with the right wing and with Republicans and with others in the country. And I know you have the similar philosophy, which is that these are popular policies. These are things that Trump voters, Democratic voters can agree on in many places. And we need to be the party that is pushing these things, because if we give Republicans a choice of just the same economics, then they often default to people who speak more to their grievance. And that has been the Republicans. But if we say, "Look, we are actually going to deliver these things and have the trust to do it," then I think we can win these people back. And the problem is not with the voters. The problem was with us. And that's, I think, the fundamental lesson the Democrats have to learn from the past few elections.
Yeah. I mean, the final thing I'll say is, can you coach the Democratic Party? You just get it. So thank you. Thank you for getting it. Thank you for not, writing off half of the country of voters because they didn't vote for your preferred candidate. We do have to persuade people. Politics is the art of persuasion. And, you're willing to speak to people that other Democrats are afraid to speak to in order to accomplish these policies. So I commend you for that. And thank you so much for doing it.
Well, I appreciate that, and you get it too. I don't think there's a rocket science. I just go to these communities and meet folks. I was in Allentown. There were a bunch of Trump voters who were protesting there when at my town hall. And a few ladies say, "Hey, Congressman Khanna, can you come here?" And I said, so I started walking to them. They said, "We saw you on Fox News. Can we get a selfie?" So I said, "Sure." And then I invited a few of them into the town hall, and they applauded for certain things. They disagreed with other things. But the point is that how many members of Congress are out there just trying to talk to normal people? Obviously, a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. He wouldn't be president otherwise. And I just think they don't need me as a coach. They've just got to get out there more. And I think that's my one piece of advice in this year, especially in the off year. Just go listen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And look, I'll give away part of Rose's magic trick here. You know how you get Republicans to agree to paid family leave? You don't have to do anything. They already agree. 74% of Republican voters agree that we should have paid family leave. You just need a couple of brave people in Congress to propose it. And then the country will actually rally behind these proposals because both Republican and Democratic voters want it. All right. Well, look, you've seen us fight with Roe, you've seen us agree with Roe, and he always comes back and he's always got new ideas and really, in this case, wonderfully populist and uniting ideas. So we appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.